Hey, Romamnesia here, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. Now, when I make my introduction video, I'm going to mention this, but since I haven't made that yet, I want to be a little more notable before I make that video. I'm going to go ahead and say it here. I'm not just going to be talking about political things on this channel. I also want to talk about culture and art, and sometimes be critical of it, sometimes praise it. Today we're going to be a little critical of it, because we're going to be talking about the current state of popular culture. And I have 4 points prepared, and we're going to kind of go through them because I don't want this video to ramble on too long. But this is a big subject, and I'm probably going to be doing more videos on it, but I felt like this was a good first video to talk about culture because this is, yet again, the pop culture, and this is a very broad statement. So without further rambling, let's get right into it. So my first point is that everything has kind of become stale. Now you can see this in movies, you can see this in music, you can see this in video games. Of course, there are always going to be exceptions to the rule. Of course, there are plenty of great things that have come out from 2010 to 2017. And of course there will. There has never been a decade where nothing good has come out. But as a whole, the 3 art forms that I've listed, the music, movies, and video games, have all become extremely stale in the mainstream. You have a crap ton of shooters, the same 4x4 electronic beat played over and over again for music, and you have the same kind of movie, more than likely a sequel in Hollywood. There's plenty of sequels to go around, and have been plenty of sequels. You have so much rehashed content. It's kind of mind-boggling, actually. And this is comparable somewhat to the 80s, because in the 80s the pop scene was really bad, and a lot of people compare the current pop scene to the 80s pop scene. However, something that's a little different and very notable about the 80s is the 80s actually had a very prominent underground. I mean, plenty of great music came from the 80s and the underground. Plenty of great movies came from the 80s. Not so much video games, but I guess video games got their start in the 80s. I think they actually technically started in the 70s. But, point being, movies and music were still obviously relevant back then. But in the pop scene in the 80s, it was kind of the same thing. A lot of rehashed garbage. And that's what we're in right now. But unfortunately, we don't seem to have the underground that the 80s had. And it's sad. It really is. But, sorry about that. But any time something becomes popular, it gets done into the fucking ground and rehashed a billion times. And unfortunately, it makes everything become stale. And that is what the current cultural state that we're in, the current pop culture state that we are in, is a bunch of rehashed material, a bunch of rehashed ideas. Anyway, I'm going to move on to my second point. I can talk a lot about this, but I'm trying to keep it to broad statements because I'm thinking of other videos that'll kind of dig deeper into these statements themselves. But yet again, I think it's important to just make this video as a broad, general claim of our current pop culture. The second thing is that, the second point rather, that I'd like to make is everything is a popularity contest. You look at any mainstream art, and the ones that are revered the most are just the most popular. They're not actually the best. Some could argue skill is pretty much thrown out the window in the current pop scene, and I would actually kind of argue that myself. And it's, yet again, sad to me, because as someone who does want to dig deep and find, the best of the best, and, I love discovering new music, new movies, new books, new graphic novels, comic books, I love discovering all these things. And it really sucks that it's very hard in 2017 and in the current culture that we're in to find these things, because the best of the best are always just the most popular. There's no reason someone like Beyonce or Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber should ever win awards. There's no reason. They're not talented. So, it's... Anyway, I'm going to move on to the third point, but yet again, I could ramble on about this second point, and I'm going to later. But the main thing to take away from the second point is that skill is not important, so it seems, and if you're popular, if you have enough likes, enough subscribers, enough album sales, you will be considered good just because. The third point I'd like to make, and this is actually very important, and this is going to be going more into the heart of this particular video, is that it's cool to fit in nowadays. And this is very important. This is why 2017 and the 2010s in general are very, very, very problematic, to use a word from the mainstream. And the reason is because it's cool to fit in. Now, I'm sure you've noticed this, but even in the non-popular culture, the counterculture, the underground, it is considered cool to fit in. Like, everyone has to have the same ideas. Anyone you disagree with is now just kind of deemed uncool just for disagreeing with them. Not because, of actual reasons, just because they don't agree with everything you say. It's kind of scary, actually, because it does have a lot of deeper effects than just, your taste in music or your taste in movies. But everything in this pop culture seems to be just about fitting in. If you fit in, you're cool. You're one of the cool kids for fitting in. Now, this is why I bring this up, though, or why I bring up that it's problematic now, more so than it has been in the past. Yet again, if we look at the 80s had the punk movement. I mean, it was at least when it was in its height, whether you want to argue yet again it started in the 70s or not, but that is very important. The 2010s do not seem to have a punk movement at all. And of course this is very specific to music, but it's also very telling of the culture of the time. We don't have a punk movement. Our closest thing to a punk movement has probably been in electronic music, and electronic music is one of the biggest examples, proprietors, if you will, of people who do the same fucking thing. They are completely the people that I'm talking about here who rehash ideas and try to fit in, try to be the mainstream and all this stuff. And that is, for the most part, the closest thing to a punk movement that we have. And that's very sad, and it's very scary. I mean, I don't mean to be all fear-mongering here, because I don't think it's that scary, but it is scary that, in general, it is cooler to have the same ideas for everyone in the room to agree with each other than it is for people to disagree, for people to, actually have some, differing opinions. Apparently, it's just cool to fit in. And yet again, I will actually give a good example. And yet again, we're going to be talking about music, but the same can be said about actors, the same can be said about video games. It's everywhere. But look at something like deathcore. Now, this might be kind of dividing my audience right now, because maybe not a lot of you listen to metal or, deathcore or anything like that. But if you look at something like deathcore, death metal even, to an extent, everyone's putting out the same goddamn album right now. No one is making anything unique. Everyone sounds the same. Everyone sounds like Chelsea Grin to an extent. Chelsea Grin doesn't even sound like Chelsea Grin anymore, but everyone sounds like Chelsea Grin. Everyone sounds like Whitechapel. Everyone sounds exactly the same. And honestly, even to someone like me who likes deathcore, who likes metal, you could probably play me 5 bands that I don't know side by side and tell me that was one band's EP, and I probably would believe you. And that goes everywhere. In underground video games, I see a common trend of people trying to rehash the same idea. Look at games like Slender and all the millions of clones it made. Look at Farmville and all the millions of clones it made. Flappy Birds and all the millions of clones it made. Everyone is trying to be exactly the same, even in underground movements. Like, it's one thing when your pop scene tries to all be the same. Okay, the preps all try to act like each other anyway. That's kind of obvious, right? And in high school, preps try to act like each other, and that's really what the pop scene is preps all grown up. But when the metalheads and the punks and the nerds and the outcasts all act exactly the same as well, and want to act exactly the same, that's where it gets really, really, really troublesome for an art form. Anyway, to get on to my fourth point, and I've touched up on this a little bit, we don't really recognize good talent anymore. And this is something that I'm actually extremely sad about, and has affected many, many, many people. We will give more attention to someone who is bad, to someone who is ironically, good, or ironically funny, or, something like that. Look at Slim Jesus the rapper. Look at, look at The Room, the movie. Look at, Octodad. Now, I don't even care if you like these things. I actually like all three of those things that I just mentioned. But it's sad when you probably have a greater chance of being successful for making something dumb, goofy, or just flat out bad than actually pouring your heart and soul into something. And you can argue, well, there's just a such thing as bad art, which I can argue that, and I will make a video on that, I promise. But you cannot tell me that there is more, you cannot tell me that there is more ironic art, I'll call it, being funded, being viewed, being, given attention than good struggling artists. I mean, good struggling artists pretty much are just left out to starve, but the bad artists get discovered, get views. They may never get a paycheck. They may never get actual notoriety, and they will never be remembered. I dare say none of these things will ever stand the test of time, but they are still getting attention. And that seems to be something very unique of our current timeline. I have never read about anything like this, never heard anything like this from pretty much the 50s to the 2000s. Yes, it was fun to laugh at some bad movies. Look at Troll 2, for example. And they become cult classics to a degree, but never on the scale that I see movies, video games, and books even. I've seen a whole article written about some, I think, man who made dinosaur erotica. Like, that's not good. Why are we giving that the time of day? And I'm not saying, because, I can be reasonable here, I'm not saying that you shouldn't like these things. Like I said, I do. I'm not saying you shouldn't even watch these things. But why do we not give the same time, patience, and energy and enthusiasm for good artists, for people who are trying to actually make something? And then we see these people who kind of try to bridge the divide. We'll see these artists, mainly in music, who will be derpy, but actually try to be good. And, and sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. I'll give Macklemore kind of an example of someone who does that. But, of course, Macklemore had to eventually get all political and super up his own ass. But regardless, it's sad that we don't recognize true talent. We don't give true talent the time of day as a society anymore, so it seems. But we will give the absolute shit tier a platform and throw all of our attention and money at it. Anyway, that's going to wrap up this episode. I didn't want to ramble too much. I've actually cut a few takes of this because I was rambling way too much, and I want to kind of make specific videos that are more directly focused on some of these individual topics with particular art forms. But this is mainly to just tell you my problems with the current popular culture of art. So, if you agree, like it, subscribe. Check out that description. I haven't put anything in the descriptions yet, but I'm going to. Trust me. All my videos will have a description by the end of my YouTube career, I promise. And there's going to be some cool things in there. So check out the description. Make sure to like, please, subscribe. Those things are very important. And I'm going to be trying to upload a lot more videos. So stay tuned for that. And if you disagree, comment. Let's talk. Let's debate. I'm very open to conversation. So, like always, have a great day.